Welcome to our ongoing classes on Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, the 7 Noahide commandments for the Gentiles, for all of mankind. The class we're doing today is a continuation of the long ongoing series that we've been doing, and that is in the Encyclopedia Talmudit, the Talmudical Encyclopedia, Krach Hey, Volume 5, and the entry is Goy, Gimel Vav Yud, Gentile, non-Jew. And we are currently on page, or better yet, column, Shin Nun Gimel, 353, and the bottom of that column, and we're discussing all sorts of various different things that a Jew needs to know with regards to his relationship, his interaction, his dealings with the non-Jew. And right now we're up to the subsection within the entry of Goy, which begins and is titled Mechashash Limud Mimaisav, things which are out of concern that the Jew might learn from the actions, from the behavior of the non-Jew, which of course we don't want, and the rabbis, of course, were very careful to see to it that a Jew not learn anything inappropriate or anything negative from his non-Jewish surrounding. And with that we begin. Yesh dvarim sha'asra Torah. There are things that the Torah prohibited, kidei shelo yasiru hagoyim oisanu miderech Hashem. And the reason why the Torah prohibits these things is in order that the non-Jews should not take astray the Jewish people or individuals from the path of Hashem, God's path. K'moi ha'isur lischateni mohem. For instance, interesting, the prohibition against intermarriage. Why can a Jew not marry a non-Jew? Shemifurash b'Torah hatam. So we need not look too far, we need not think too hard, but rather in the Torah itself, in the Bible, in the written law, it is explicit, the reason. As the verse states, and this is in Dvarim, Perek Zayin Pasuk Daled, Deuteronomy, chapter 7, verse 4. Ki yasir es bincha me'acharai v'goymer, for he will lead astray your son from me. So God is saying, do not let your child marry a non-Jew, for they will take astray your son. Meaning your grandson, for example, because if your daughter, God forbid, were to marry, if a Jew's daughter that is, were to marry a non-Jew, so the child, the son that she will have, is a Jew. But the other way, if your son, your Jewish son, that is, if one's Jewish son marries a non-Jewish woman, then that child, that grandson, is a goy, is a non-Jew. V'chein, and likewise, lo yesh v'bartzecha, they are not to settle in your land, pen yachtiu ois chali, lest they cause you to sin against me. And that verse is from Shmois, Chav Gimel, Lamed Gimel. Exodus, chapter 23, verse 33. Shaloi nilmad mikfirasam, so that we, the Jews, should not learn from their heresy, from their denial. And that is how Maimonides, in his Sefer HaMitzvos, negative commandment number 51 explains the prohibition, and that the reason is so that the Jews should not learn from their non-believing philosophies. V'hulav shenimna b'minyan ha-mitzvahs, and this in fact is a lo yisaseh. It is one of the 365 negative commandments, and that is that the Jew should not learn from the actions of the non-Jew. So it's not rabbinic, and it's not merely something which the Torah states. It's actually one of the 613 commandments, one of the negative commandments. But now there is a dispute amongst the earlier codifiers. There are those that say, some interpret this verse that states that you're not allowed to allow them to have a residence, to dwell in your land. That's referring clearly, they say, exclusively to the 7 nations of the Canaani, Hitti, Amori, etc. Those are the ones that we are to expel, and they are not allowed to live in the land of Israel. But then there are those that say, that so long as the Jewish people have a strong controlling hand, then it is forbidden for us Jews to allow, and again it says akum, which really would be idolaters, but as mentioned many times in these classes, the censorship simply distorted it so much that we no longer know what it should say. Nochri, goy, akum. So akum literally means an idolater, but generally it's a reference to any non-Jew, and it could be with the exception of course, a ger toishav, which we do not have nowadays. It could be any Gentile that has accepted upon himself or herself to keep the 7 Noahide commandments. They may be an exception that's not included in your regular akum or goy. Be that as it may, it is forbidden, they say, as long as the Jewish people have the governing control, to allow any non-Jew amongst us, beinenu. Even if they are sitting there, they're dwelling there temporarily. Or they're simply traveling and passing through from one place to the other on business. They're just passing through our land on business. They are not allowed to go through your land. You have to have them go make a detour. It doesn't matter. The shortest distance between 2 points may be a straight line, and that may go right through the land, the Holy Land of Israel. Sorry, according to these opinions, they have to take a detour, and they cannot get from point A to point B through our land. So that's the other opinion. The afalpi, and even though shekolinyan aparsha sham, that the whole section there in the Torah, that whole section where it says this verse is talking clearly about the 7 nations. So the first opinion seems to make perfect sense to interpret it that the prohibition is only for those 7 nations, which, by the way, nowadays it would be completely academic, because since the days of Sancheriv, the king of Ashur, no nation knows their real nationality. And he just took all the people of the world and purposely mixed nations. And therefore, the nations don't really still have their original status. And therefore, the people that are living in the land of Mitzrayim, for example, today, Egypt, are not necessarily the descendants of the original Mitzrayim, the original Egyptians. And for that matter, every land in the world they're not necessarily the same people, where they're not to be considered and treated as the same people of the original nations that were there from after the Great Flood until Sancheriv came along and distorted and mixed up everything. So the 7 nations, we don't know where they are today. So therefore, every non-Jew in the world is to be assumed that he's not one of the 7, because if there are 70 nations in the world, so 7 are only a very small minority. And the rule is that if something or someone comes out of a mix, we are to assume that it came from the majority. So since the remaining 63 some nations are permitted, so then we assume every individual is one of those people. So that would be the first opinion. So how does the second opinion say that it applies to any goy, and they can't be in the land of Israel, when that section is talking clearly about the 7 nations? Kivan shekasuv, so they will tell you because the verse explains the reason. This is not a law, a God-given law without logic or without reason that we know of. The reason is explicitly written there in the verse. Pen yachtiu oischali, lest they cause you to sin against me. Lamadnu sheriba kol hamachatim. So this teaches us that this verse is including all sinners. So again, that would probably then include idolaters or Jews, or non-Jews that are heretics of some sort. And even according to the second opinion, which is much stricter, if the guy behaves according to Torah law for him, he abides by the 7 laws, so even that opinion should agree that they're allowed to be in the land of Israel. V'yesh cholkim v'soivrim. And then there are those which disagree, and they maintain that the verse is simply speaking about settling in the land, but not passing through. So we now have a third opinion, that even if you want to say that it applies to all non-believing and non-observant non-Jews, not just the 7 nations, but it disagrees with the opinion that says they can't even go through if it's a business trip. No, they're allowed to pass through the land, they just can't settle there. So now we address this clearly. What happens if the particular non-Jew we're talking about formally accepted upon himself not to worship idolatry, not to worship anything other than God Almighty? Then it is permitted to give him a settling amongst us. He's allowed to dwell amongst us. The Olav Nemar, and with regarding to that individual, the verse states, Im chayeshev b'kir b'chavagemer. With you he shall sit, he shall dwell in your midst. And that verse is in Dvarim, Chaf Gimel, Yud Zayin. Deuteronomy 23, verse 17. And yet there are others that say that it is insufficient to merely accept the main mitzvah of the 7 mitzvahs, which is not to worship idolatry, but he has to actually accept all 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach. And even if he did not accept it formally in front of a Jewish court known as a Beis Din, but rather on his own, he accepted personally to keep all 7. Then we do not hold him back from living and from settling in the Holy Land of Eretz Yisrael. Now this, of course, has great relevance to nowadays. Not that the government has control or chooses to take control, which is very unfortunate, and that is a whole discussion that would actually be an entire lecture for itself, which is completely beyond the scope of tonight's class, but I'll just throw it out there. The fact that in the Holy Land of Israel today, thank God, there is a Jewish sovereignty, so to say, that the government is a Jewish one is yet a far cry from what it's supposed to be and what it should be. Not to get into it in detail, as I said, but there are a lot of good things about the way it's run, but just to sum it up and to give you the final concluding bottom line, it is not being run, for the most part, according to Torah, according to Jewish law, and the government does not have the legal, by Jewish law that is, by Torah law, the status of Jewish rulership for many reasons, because it's a democracy which allows non-Jews, including people that clearly do not keep the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, including people that are idolaters, to be citizens and to have an equal voice in voting and in voicing their opinion. So that's not the way it's supposed to be. However, if the Jewish people would have proper control of the land, so then we need to know which non-Jews can live there and which can't. So at least according to the opinion that we just cited, it would be permissible to have a non-Jew who accepts upon himself, even though we don't have a proper Sanhedrin, a proper court nowadays, but it's enough that he accepted upon himself to keep and adhere and observe the 7 Noahide commandments. That person should be able to be stamped as having a right to live in the land. He's not called a Ger Toshav nowadays. He has a right to live in the land of Israel. So that would include many, many Goyim, many non-Jews, especially recently, as so many of you, hopefully, already are keeping all 7, accepted all 7, are in the process of accepting and learning about them and so forth. So that's lots of people that if you want to go to the land of Israel and you're not Jewish and you don't want to just go for a visit, you want to go and settle and live there, it would be permissible. But all those people that, according to one opinion, don't keep all 7, didn't accept to keep all 7, or at least according to the other opinion, didn't accept upon themselves avodah zarah, to negate and to denounce idolatry, they're not allowed to live in the land. Even if they could pass through, which we have different opinions, so that's debatable. But to live there, nope, it's not allowed. And unfortunately, there is a huge amount of non-Jews that don't have a right and do live in the land. So the last 3 lines of this paragraph are references where else to look in this encyclopedia for further discussion on this topic. V'ayin oid ger toishav al yeshivas ger toishav baaretz. So there is a section in this encyclopedia called Ger Toshav. Over there, it discusses the Ger Toshav living in the land of Israel. And then, Al din mechiras or haskaras batim legoy, with regards to selling or renting homes in the land of Israel to a non-Jew, ayin oid lo yisechonim. So then there is another entry in this encyclopedia called lo yisechonim, and that is a quote from the verse, which is it's a negative commandment. It means do not, and there are different interpretations of what sechonim means, but in this case it means do not give them settling rights. So that could mean that you're not allowed to sell them any land or apartment, or perhaps not even to rent it to them. And over there, when it says leisechonim, we go into all the other details of all the things which fall under that prohibition. And we continue. So we're now on the bottom half of Shin Nun Dalet, 354. Then, everything we said until now in this paragraph was all biblical. Different opinions, but it was all biblical, as we quoted verses. And the reasons were given so that they do not cause you to sin. But then, the sages, the rabbis, they instituted things out of concern, Shema Yilmad Yisrael Mimaisav Shel Goy, that perhaps the Jew would learn from the deeds, from the behavior of the non-Jew. And therefore they instituted and decreed things. She'ein Eruv Chatzeros v'lo bitul reshus mo'ilim begoy shadar yachad im Yisraelim bechatzer at she'yizkar mimenu reshus. There's a concept that a Jew on Shabbos is not permitted to carry in a public domain. Okay? It's one of the 39 chief categories of work or labor on Shabbos, is to transport from one domain, from a private domain to a public domain, or vice versa, or within a public domain itself. The laws are extremely detailed when it comes to that. Now, what happens when you have a bunch of private domains which all lead out to a common area? It's not public, because to be public, it's got to be 600,000 people daily traffic through. So that's not. So it's a common area. So practically speaking, it could be a block that has a bunch of homes of Jewish people, and it can have a dead end, and then they can have a gate in the front, so it's all closed in. So each one has their own home. So inside their own house, there's no question. But then what about that shared, that common area? Or, even more common than that, an apartment building. So the hallway, the stairway, all the common area where every tenant has a right to live or to use. All right? You have each person either owns their own apartment, their condominium, or they're renting it. Makes no difference really. But then you have the common area, which they all have a right, and they all pay their dues for the building and all that, maintenance, whatever, whatever. So, they need to make something called an Eruv Chatzeros. Okay, this is rabbinic. They instituted that they have to make an Eruv Chatzeros. An Eruv, in this case, basically means to take food. And before Shabbos, one person has to take a certain amount of food, and it's put aside, it's designated as the common food for everybody, and everybody has a right to come and take that food. And because that food is found on this property, it will enable and allow all the Jews to carry in the common areas. Okay? Generally speaking, matzah is used because that can stay fresh and you don't have to do it every week, and it can stay for the whole year. Now, the problem is, what happens if you have a non-Jew who's a tenant? So now, in this apartment building with 10 apartments, you don't have 10 Jews, which would then be very simple. Then they could make this Eruv Chatzeros without a problem. One or more of the tenants that own or are renting an apartment is a non-Jew. So what do? So the rabbis who made up all these rules of the Eruv Chatzeros, they said that for the non-Jew to forego his ownership, his share of ownership in the common area for Shabbos is not acceptable, is insufficient. He can't say, I am going to give up my ownership. Of course, I can walk through it because you're all giving me permission to walk through your corridor or your hallway. But I'm going to give up my share of ownership, my partnership, for Shabbos. That won't work in the case of a goy. But rather, Achiyizkar menu rishus. The Jew must rent from the non-Jew his area. So the Jew has to give him a penny. Doesn't matter how much, but he has to give him money before Shabbos and say, with this money, I am renting your section, your share of ownership, of partnership. Why did they do that? Why can't we just have the non-Jew nullify and give up for Shabbos his ownership? Because the goy would not want to rent to them, because he would be concerned that there's some type of magic happening over here. Something is very strange and fishy. The guy is going to say, what's this business? You're renting from me. That's what you're telling me. And you don't want to live with me, and you won't carry in this common area without paying me rent? When I ask you, well, what'll happen if I don't accept your money? I don't want you to give me your dollar so that you can have ownership or whatever, use my area for every Shabbos. And then the Jew says, well, then I won't be able to carry in that common area. Vada yesh kan kshafim badavar. Certainly there's some kind of a magic, something, you're doing all sorts of strange, superstitious stuff. And therefore the Jew will move out. So according to this opinion, the reason why the rabbis insisted that you pay rent to the non-Jew is to discourage the Jew from living in such a situation, in such a setting. So it's in order to get the Jews to move out. And it's not that we don't want him to rent it at all. But rather we want it to happen that every single Erev Shabbos, every single Friday, the Jew will have to go through this again to rent from anew, and it'll be difficult. And eventually, someone's going to move out. If the non-Jew moves out, well, good. And if not, then the Jew should move out. That's one opinion. Now, on a practical level, basically, what happens is the Jew does come to the non-Jew, and nowadays, especially if we're talking about nice people, both the Jew and the non-Jew, reasonable people, and Jews do things which in the eyes of their non-Jewish neighbors are very strange, and that's okay. And most of the time, unless it's a very anti-Semitic or a very tense setting, most situations, the non-Jew will not necessarily be understanding, but will be tolerant and even respectful. And his attitude will probably be something like, okay, whatever. And the Jew comes to the non-Jew, and he says to him, for my religious purposes, in order for me to carry in this hallway on the Sabbath from nightfall Friday until about 25 hours later, Saturday night, I need you to accept rent from me. Now, at first, when he hears this, he says, no, what are you talking about? The rent from me? He says, no. He thinks you're going to pay him rent. He says, no, just for Saturdays, and I'm going to give you $1. And he's thinking, well, if you're already going to pay me rent, no, I'm giving you $1, and with that, and the non-Jew doesn't have to really understand what he's doing. He just has to know that this Jew is paying rent so that he can use the common area. And usually they're understanding and they say, fine. They say, no, it's not necessary. But the Jew insists and he says, no, you need to accept this money. Fine. So he takes it. Problem is, what do you do when you have a really large building and there are many non-Jews? Are you supposed to find every one of them? And inevitably, you're going to have, if you have so many people, you're going to have one person that's going to just, even if it's not done in a malicious way, he'll just be the troublemaker and he won't be interested and he won't accept it from me. He says, I'm not taking anything from you and leave me alone and, do your religious thing. Don't push your religion on me. He said, no, this is for my sake, the Jew says. It won't go. So it's a problem, and I'm not going to go into exactly what's done, but in many cases, there are a lot of details, so, as I said, so it depends. But in many cases, it would be sufficient to pay either the manager of the building or the superintendent, who has rights to every apartment to some degree, or if the non-Jewish owner of the apartment building owns certain things in every apartment, such as appliances, there are ways. Then perhaps the Jew would just pay rent to that person and not have to worry about the 50 non-Jewish tenants. But it's not so simple. Each case has to be dealt with, and it's a Jewish issue, Jewish problem, and the Jew has to ask his competent rabbi, tell him exactly the situation, and he will give him guidance. V'chein, and likewise, again, we're continuing now with something that the rabbis instituted so that the Jew does not learn from his non-Jewish neighbors. Likewise, Asru Chachamim, the rabbis have forbidden, Lahalvos Lagoy Beribis Kitzutza, to lend money to a non-Jew with a set amount of interest. Why? Biblically, the Jew is supposed to lend money to the non-Jew with interest and borrow from him with interest. Because if we do allow him to have such a set amount of interest, that will only encourage the Jew to continue lending money to the non-Jew, which of course would encourage him to settle and live with this non-Jew. And because of that, we're afraid he might learn from his behavior. However, the rabbis did not decree on all other business transactions. Because when it comes to business transactions, that you can also have with a Jew, and therefore the Jew won't learn from the non-Jew. When it comes to charging interest, a Jew can only charge interest from a non-Jew. So therefore we're afraid that he's going to learn from the non-Jew. But when it comes to business, there's no problem with interacting and buying and selling from the non-Jew, because he can buy and sell the same way from the Jew, or to the Jew. But interest for a loan, which is forbidden for a Jew with a fellow Jew, and it's only permitted with the non-Jew, so there we should be concerned that perhaps he'll learn from his behavior. And when they made the rules, so the rabbis made special allowances, and they said that a Torah scholar, someone who's in that category, he is permitted to, because they're not concerned that he will learn from the non-Jew. Because he's not accustomed to being there, because most of the time he's going to be studying Torah, he's going to be in the study hall, so we're not afraid that he's going to end up becoming too involved with his non-Jew. Ba'avak ribis. Then you have something which is not exactly, it's not a biblical prohibition of interest, it's a rabbinic prohibition of interest for a Jew to charge it to the non-Jew. Certain things which are not really interest, but they're like interest. So biblically it's permitted, but rabbinically it's forbidden. So what about such a thing? Mutar lahalvos loy. In such a way, a Jew is allowed to lend money to the non-Jew. Because since they only allowed it in such a way, Yizkar, he will remember, and therefore he won't learn from the non-Jew. Or alternatively, since he's not making a lot of money, it's only avak ribis, it's not real interest. So the Jew is not making that much. Therefore he's not going to hang around and he won't intermingle with this non-Jew all day. Lilvis min hagoy beribis. How about borrowing money from the non-Jew with interest? Mutter, that's permitted. Sharehu beirech milfanov. Because if anything, the Jew is running away from such situations. He's not interested in borrowing money for interest, and therefore he's not going to be hanging around this guy. If anything, he's going to try to keep his distance because he borrowed money with interest, or he doesn't want to have to borrow money again from because of the interest. Bichtei chayav. How about if the Jew needs it for his very livelihood? I mean, just for survival, rather, not for luxuries, not to make money, but for his bare minimum. In that case, they made another allowance, and they said you're allowed to lend money to the non-Jew, even if it's biblical interest. It's permitted if the Jew really needs it simply for his bare minimal needs. Because for Rishonim, and the early codifiers wrote, that nowadays it's all permitted. Because nowadays we have these taxes from the king and the various different governing bodies, and therefore everything is considered our minimal needs. And another reason, that at a time when the Jewish people are living amongst the nations, it's impossible to make a profit from anything without doing business with them. And therefore, taking interest, is not going to cause the Jew to learn from his deeds any more than any other business. We said that when it comes to business, so you're allowed to do business with a non-Jew because you could do the same business with a Jew. But nowadays the situation is such that it's almost impossible for a Jew to do business solely with Jews. So therefore he's going to have to do business with a non-Jew anyway. And we're not concerned that he's going to learn from his deeds. Therefore, he can also lend to the non-Jew with interest. Or alternatively, another explanation to why nowadays they say it's permitted, because nowadays everybody makes themselves like a Torah scholar. So everybody, as far as this halacha is concerned, falls into that category. Okay, then there's two other sections that they send us to look at if we want to find out more things, and that is about, one is the entry in this encyclopedia called Chukos HaGoyim, the statutes or the customs of the non-Jews, and the other one is called Bishulei Goyim, the cooked items, cooked food. So those are two completely separate issues itself, which are kind of related, but they're not in this part, they're in those other sections. Next section, we are on the bottom half of Shin Nun Hey, 355, B'yachas Legufay, with regards to the body of the non-Jew. It is forbidden for a Jew to spill the blood, to murder a non-Jew. For even prior to the giving of the Torah at Sinai, we, the human race, we were all commanded about not spilling blood. And after the giving of the Torah, so because it became more strict, because God gave the Jewish people all these laws, so you think now it became more lenient? Until then, we couldn't kill. And now you think that it would be permitted to? And the law of the Jew who killed a non-Jew is a divine one. It's given to the heavenly court, meaning that the punishment is what's called misa b'dei shamayim, death by the hands of heaven. So the Jewish court, the Sanhedrin, would not put this Jew to death. So the Beis Din would not kill a Jew for killing a human being, if that person was not Jewish, but he is liable to be put to death by the heavenly court. Shenemar, and how do we know that it's not so to say, well, it's a capital offense in a sense, but how do we know that the Jewish court would not actually execute the Jew who killed a non-Jew? Because the verse says, "V'chi yazit ish al re'ehu," and if a person is to purposely come up against his re'ehu, his fellow Jew. So that verse says that it's only the punishment for murder is only if a Jew kills another Jew. Otherwise, it is, of course, forbidden. And as we said, it's death by the heavenly court. And then there are those Rishonim, those early codifiers, which wrote, that the negative commandment, which is, of course, one of the 10 commandments, of loy tirtzach, thou shalt not murder, nemar bein al Yisrael bein al goy, is that prohibition, that negative commandment, is referring to a Jew and a non-Jew alike. And then there are those that say that it's a derivative or a subdivision of murder. You know, it's the primary prohibition of murder for a Jew is to kill another Jew. And as a next level, a subdivision of that, it's the prohibition of killing any human. So everyone agrees it's forbidden. The question is, to what degree? And likewise, it is forbidden to indirectly cause, a Jew cannot cause a non-Jew to die when there's no war amongst us. If it's not a time of war, so then a Jew cannot even indirectly or be any type of a cause of the death of a non-Jew. Even if the non-Jews are idolaters and they're transgressing the 7 Noahide commandments, which means that the Beis Din is supposed to put them to death, or they themselves should have a court system that they have corporal punishment, but an individual Jew is not allowed to kill non-Jews, even if they are worshipping Avodah Zarah and don't keep the 7 mitzvahs. B'shas milchama amru, during a time of war, though, they said, Toiv shebagoyim haroig, that the good amongst the goyim killed. But that's clearly talking about a time of war. Shenemar, for as the verse states, Vayikach sheishmeis rechav bachur v'goymer. Right after the Exodus from Egypt, in the book of Exodus, so the Egyptians regretted allowing the Jews to leave after the 10th plague of the death of the firstborn, and they begged the Jews, get out and go. The Hebrews then left, the Jewish people, the Jewish nation left, and we were on our way to the Yam Suf, to the, what they call the Red Sea. At that time, the Egyptians, Paroi, after they were really beaten, and so many of them died during the 10 plagues, but at this point, they regretted it. And it says that he took 600 chariots and riders. So the question is raised, Mishel Mihayu, where did they get these 600 horses from? The animals were killed. Mishel Hayares Dvar Hashem, from the Egyptians that feared the word of Hashem, because there was a warning given, and some of them took heed and brought the animals inside for protection. They didn't want them to get killed by the various different plagues. So what do we see? I'm sorry, Sharei Kvar Namar, for it already says, that all of the cattle of Egypt was killed. They all died. Because since during the time of war, the non-Jew comes against the Jew and he's coming to kill the Jew, so you too, the Jew, get up earlier and don't wait until he confronts you and kill him, because it's a time of war. But if it's not a time of war, it is forbidden. So in other words, we see that the trouble that the Jewish people encountered after the exodus from Egypt was actually from the good Egyptians. It was those Egyptians that did listen and did take seriously the warning that was given to them in the name of Hashem, of God. So those are the ones that in a time of war came after us to kill us. So therefore, if it's during wartime, the Jew should not have any worries, but he should just kill the goy that is at war with him. But if it's not a time of war, it is forbidden. And as it says, that they were told, take your cattle. Come and see the mercy, the compassion of God Almighty. Even when he is, so to say, angry, he still had mercy and pity on the wicked. Because when it came to the plague of hail, he did not have it fall on them, on the Egyptians, but just on the produce of the earth, on the land. Therefore, he warned them that they should guard themselves. So you're talking about evil, wicked Egyptians that enslaved the Jewish people, the chosen people. And yet, when it came to the plague of hail, God has mercy and pity on those Egyptians. And he warns them, because he's going to smite what? The produce of the land. So too, of course, every Jew has to learn from God's ways and have mercy and compassion even on sinners. Next. A Jew is not to bring up, to help, to assist in pulling out an idolater from the pit. You have a guy who's deep down in the pit, and if he doesn't get out, he will die. So the Jew can throw him a ladder or a rope or assist him in getting up. Say, no, if you know that the guy down there is an idolater, don't help him get out. For there is a verse which says, this is in Vayikra Yutes Tezayin, the book of Leviticus 19, chapter 19, verse 16. Do not stand by the blood of Rei Echav, your fellow Jew. A Jew is not allowed to stand idly by when he can help and save the Jew, and he can't just watch him drown or watch him die. Vein ze Rei Echav. But the person who is an idolater, not only is he not Jewish, and no level is he called your fellow. When does this rule apply? Only in the Goyim of ancient times, when the rabbis first instituted these rules. That they were idolaters. But the Goyim of our times nowadays, there is an obligation to save them. A Jew must save the non-Jew. A Jew is not allowed to mind his own business. The non-Jew is his responsibility to save him. And don't assume, he might be an idolater. No, nowadays the assumption is he's not. And actually even the ones that are, so we've learned elsewhere that they're really not. Because they don't know better, or they don't really do it for the sake of idolatry, not doing it for religious purposes, they're just doing it because it's, so to say, the custom that they have from their forefathers or whatever. They don't really know why they're doing it, they don't really mean it, so there's much room for leniency. Bottom line is, practically speaking, if a Jew sees a non-Jew in the pit, he has an obligation and a responsibility to save him. Hagoyim shein ma'ili moisam Af rifuyim asur. The goyim, the non-Jews, that a Jew is not allowed to pull out to save, so he's also not allowed to heal them if they are ill or sick. Fafilu bischar, even for money, even for payment. Unless he's afraid of them. If he's afraid that since they know that he's a doctor, or they know that he is able to help heal, and he refrains, so he's afraid of them. Or he's concerned of something called Ava, which basically means that we don't want to cause ill feelings and hatred between us and them. So that would also be permissible. But all of this applies only to a guy who is an idolater. A guy that took upon himself to keep the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach. So then he is to be healed for free. The doctor should not charge him. Because we, the Jewish community, are obligated to give him life, to give him a livelihood, to support him, to sustain him. Basically, like a ger toishav used to be. So any non-Jew that accepts the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, that really changes his status. Even nowadays when we don't have ger toishav, it changes his status as far as the relationship that the Jew has towards him. That now the Jew is obligated to help him and to heal him free of charge. Al pikuach hagal b'Shabbos latzilas goy odayin pikuach nefesh. Now what about desecrating the Shabbos in order to save a non-Jew's life? So they're not getting into it over here, and they're telling us to look in this encyclopedia under the entry of pikuach nefesh, which means a life-threatening situation. Bas Yisrael, a Jewish girl, daughter of Israel. She should not be a midwife. She should not assist a woman who is an idolater in giving birth. Because she's actively helping someone give birth to a son who's going to be brought up to worship Avodah Zarah, idolatry. But the Jewish midwife is permitted to do this for pay. If the reason is, again, because we don't want to ruin relationships and cause hatred. If she's known to be a midwife. If they don't know that she's able to help give birth and to assist, so then best thing is she should stay away. But if it's known because she's a midwife for Jewish women, so then she's permitted for pay. Furthermore, a Jewish woman, a daughter of Israel, should not nurse the son of a woman that is an idolatrous woman, because in this case, she is bringing up a child to idolatry. And even for payment, it's forbidden. Because here there's no concept of Ava. Why not? Number one, she could either say, she could claim that I am single and I would like to get married. Or if she's married and she can't get away with saying that, I don't want to become disgusting in the eyes of my husband. So it may not really be too appealing to him that I'm nursing someone else's child. So she should use an excuse, and she can get away with it, and therefore they did not permit her to nurse. To help deliver the child, that's permitted for pay. But to nurse is not permitted. Kishachol of mitzara mutar. If the excess milk that she has in her breasts is causing her discomfort to this Jewish woman, either she doesn't have a child, or the child is not nursing enough, and she's not able to just express the milk and let it go to waste, whatever the case may be, then she's doing it for her sake, so then she would be permitted to nurse the child of an Oivedes Avodah Zarah, of a woman that worships Avodah Zarah. And again, all of these things were not said when it comes to a goy that's not an idolater. So a Jewish woman is permitted to nurse a regular Goy's child. It's only an Avodah Zarah which is not permitted. Kama dvarim, there are a number of things, tzivu chachamim, that the sages have commanded, lasois lagoyim, to do to or for the non-Jews, mishum darkei shalom, because of the ways of peace. So this is a whole new category. It's called darkei shalom, ways of peace. Shenemar, for the verse states in Tehillim, Psalms 145, verse 9, Toiv Hashem lakoil, God is good to all. V'rachamav al kol ma'asav, and His mercy is on all of His deeds, everything He made. V'nemar, in another verse, in Mishlei, in the book of Proverbs, chapter 3, verse 17. Doracheha darchei noyam. The ways of the Torah are ways of pleasantness. V'chol nesivosei shalom, and all of its paths are peace. Udvarim eile noyagim af begoyim shemoiv Avodah Zarah. And these things that we're about to discuss, those that fall into the category of darkei shalom, we do them even to and for the goyim that are oivdei Avodah Zarah, that are idolaters. And the following things are: Mevakrim choyle goyim im choyle Yisrael. The Jew is to visit the sick of the non-Jews together with the sick of the Jews. So, meaning, if a Jew comes to a hospital, for example, to visit people and to go from room to room, they are to visit the non-Jews as well, even if the non-Jew that is ill is an Oived Avodah Zarah. Still, because of peace, they go to everybody. The koivir meisei meisei Yisrael, and they bury their dead along with the dead of Israel. Ella, the only thing is, she'en koivir meisei bekiver Yisrael. You don't bury them in a Jewish grave, or for that matter, in the same section or in the same cemetery. But the Jew should be involved in assisting them to get a burial, same as they do for the Jew. Again, because darkei shalom. You can't have in a situation where they say, oh no, we only visit Jewish sick, or we only bury the Jewish. And you eulogize them. And they pay a condolence call. They comfort the non-Jews for the loss of relatives. And you give a livelihood and support the poor of the non-Jews along with the poor of the Jews. And we don't hold back the non-Jews that are poor from coming to collect and gather the various different gifts for the poor. Kigoyin, for example, leket, shicha, ufeya. These are 3 mitzvahs that the Jew has in the land of Israel, that they have to leave produce in their field for the poor. And we don't hold back the non-Jewish poor from coming to take these things. But rather, the non-Jewish poor come along with the Jewish poor and they take these things, and the Jew still fulfilled his mitzvah. Even if they come by themselves, no Jewish poor came. It's only non-Jews that are poor that are coming to collect these things from the field. Still, you allow them to. And likewise, all things that we just listed above, such as burying their dead or visiting their sick and the like. Doesn't necessarily mean they're coming together with the Jew. Even if they're alone. And therefore, when it says along with the Jewish dead, it means just as, in a similar way. It doesn't have to literally be that they're in the same place or the same time and just bury them in 2 different cemeteries. it could even be that there's no Jews that are dead in this situation and no Jew died. We're simply talking about non-Jews. It's still called together with the Jews because we may have the same attitude and the same conduct. Kloimar, Kishem Shekayvim Yisei Yisrael, meaning to say, just as you bury the Jewish dead. V'chein kulam, and likewise all of them, with visiting the sick. It doesn't have to be that you're going from room to room because there's Jews and also go to the non-Jews. A Jew can go to a place where he knows there are only non-Jewish sick people in order to visit them. And that's still included in along with the Jewish ill. Or you could say that when it says that with the Jewish poor, that's in order to make it more inclusive. Meaning, shafilim yesh gam aniyei Yisrael, meaning to say even if there are also poor Jews, an alternative interpretation of why it says along with the Jewish poor is to teach us something pretty incredible. Even if there are Jewish poor, and if you divide up the funds that you're going to be distributing now, and you give some of it to the non-Jew, that means that the Jew or the Jews that are needy will be receiving less. And nonetheless, you still do it, and you support the non-Jewish poor with the Jewish poor. Mitoich shemefarnesim aniyei goyim. Now, out of the fact, because we just said that we are to support financially the poor of the non-Jews, mipnei darkei shalom, because of the ways of peace, that's what we said. Chashuvim ktsas, so therefore they're a little bit considered as if you have an obligation to feed them. It became such because since you're obligated to give them tzedakah, charity, for darkei shalom, for the sake of peace, so it now became as if you have a little bit of an obligation to feed them. And therefore a Jew is permitted to trouble himself on Shabbos and give food to the non-Jew in a courtyard. But to do an absolute melacha, something which is biblically forbidden on Shabbos for the Jew, that you can't do for the non-Jew. Afilu b'Yom Tov, even on Yom Tov you can't do that. Because the melacha, the labor of cooking for the sake of eating on Yom Tov, that's permitted. That's a big difference between the Yom Tov, the Jewish festivals, and Shabbos. Shabbos, it is forbidden to cook. Yom Tov, it is permitted to cook. So the Jew can cook with fire. The fire has to be a pre-existing flame, but you can add to the flame and you can cook on Yom Tov for the sake of food. That's only for a Jew. Shenemar yeyaseh lachem, for the verse states clearly shall be done for you, for the Jew. For loy lenachrim, and not for the non-Jews. Shein mezeinaisam alecha, because you don't have to support them. So we're not saying that you actually have to feed them. It's not your obligation, but because you are supposed to give them along with the Jew, so it became kind of. And therefore, as long as it's not a biblical prohibition, you do need to, even on Shabbos or Yom Tov, do something to give it to them. But just parenthetically, let me mention, but because of this, it's a problem with inviting a non-Jew to come eat by a Jew on Yom Tov. Shabbos is not a problem, because Shabbos we're not afraid and concerned that the Jew might cook extra for the non-Jew, because he would never cook on Shabbos. But if he invites the non-Jew over, since cooking is permitted for himself or for Jews, we're afraid that he might forget and he might actually cook extra for the non-Jewish guest. Because if a Jewish guest shows up, he's allowed to throw in an extra piece of meat or whatever, but the non-Jew, he can't cook for. Masriim b'shofros af al parnosas goyim. You're allowed to sound the shofar, even for the parnasa, the support of the non-Jews. V'lachem masriim gam b'shviyas k'shelo yardu gshomim. Mipnei parnasas hagoyim. In other words, blowing the shofar is one of the acts that was done in order to elicit God's mercy and cause it to rain. They would fast, say special prayers, and amongst the things that they did was they would sound the shofar in order to awaken and arouse people to repent so that they can have God or make it rain. So what happens if it's the non-Jews that need the parnasa? The fields and everything in the areas and non-Jewish people. Then you're allowed to do it. And therefore, even in the sabbatical year of Shemitah, where a Jew is not allowed to work the land at all, and the Jew is not allowed to collect any produce at all during the 7th year, they're allowed to blow the shofar to cause it to rain, because the non-Jews need to have a livelihood. And also the Jews fast for a plague that fell amongst the non-Jews, even if it didn't affect the Jews. It only affected the non-Jews. Because they are like the Jews. The non-Jews are like the Jews. And therefore, even if it's only a plague which is affecting them, the Jews are to do what they need to do, including fasting. A Jew asks and inquires of the welfare of a non-Jew because of, again, Darkei Shalom, for the sake of peace. Even though by doing so, if you're doing it in Hebrew, in the holy tongue, he's actually using a form of a name of God, and he's putting it upon them. Who says he has a right to do that? For it's brought down that the word shalom is actually a name of Hashem. So to a fellow Jew, he could say, shalom aleichem, peace unto you, but it's not just peace, it's God. But what gives the Jew the right to say that to the non-Jew? Because of the ways of peace, Darkei Shalom, it's permitted. And the sages tell us, with regards to the great, great sage, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, that any person, no one ever greeted him with Shalom first. And even a non-Jew in the marketplace, out in the street, he always greeted everyone first. He was always the first one to greet people, including non-Jews out in the street. Likewise, they said, a person should always increase peace with everybody, and even with a non-Jew in the marketplace, in the street. A Jew should always seek to be kind and friendly and nice and make peace with everybody. But you're not allowed to double shalom to them, as he says. And therefore, it's better to be the first one to say shalom to the non-Jew. Because you don't want the non-Jew to say shalom aleichem to you first, and then the Jew responds aleichem shalom. That's not appropriate. To start off and give him peace, that's better. So therefore, the Jew should really try to be like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and greet everybody, especially if he's using the word shalom. V'dafka shalom, but this applies specifically if he's using the word shalom. Shu shmoi shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for as we said, this is the name of God. Ein lichpoil, that's what you shouldn't respond with. Aval sha'ar bracha, but any other blessing, she'ein b'shem, that doesn't have a name of God, mutter lichpoil, that you're allowed to respond. So if he says any blessing, he says, may you be blessed, or he says to you, may you have a wonderful day. So the Jew is allowed to respond and say, you too should have a wonderful day and be blessed. That's okay. Al shi'ilas shalom b'yom chagam, what about giving them shalom on their day of their festivals or something which they're worshipping, of a desire or what have you? Ayin oid eidein shalakum shi'ilas shalom. So it's sending us again in this encyclopedia to another place One is called a Dehen Shel Akum, the festivals of the non-Jews, or the section which is Sheilas Shalom, about inquiring in peace. Legoy Zakein, an elderly non-Jew, Mahadrim Bidvarim, we respect him verbally, and we physically give him a hand to support him. Not only to a Jewish elderly, but to a non-Jewish elder, a Jew is to show respect and verbally and physically help him. Shenemar, because the verse states, and this verse is in Vayikra, Yutes Lamed Beis, the book of Leviticus, 19, verse 32. Mipnei Seva Takum. You shall stand up in front of an elder. Kol Seva b'mashma. And that implies anyone old. Rabbi Yochanan hayakam milifnei zkenim goyim. Rabbi Yochanan, the great sage of the Talmud, he would stand up in front of non-Jewish elders. Vayomer, and he would say, to explain his conduct, Kama harpatkois avru alehem, v'ro harbe nisim u'moifsim. How many events, or how many of life's experiences have come upon them. Any person who's old has gone through lots of things. And they saw many miracles and signs or wonders, because that's just the nature of things. When a person's that old, so life carries with it all these various different experiences, and therefore that in itself is cause and reason to respect them, to show them honor. The goyim are excluded from the negative commandment, the prohibition for a Jew to take revenge. So revenge is permitted from a goy. And both types of revenge. One is outright revenge, and one is just to carry a grudge. So a Jew is permitted to carry a grudge against a non-Jew. So for example, if a Jew has a non-Jewish neighbor, and the Jew went to the non-Jewish neighbor, and he asked him, can I borrow your tool, a hammer, a cup of sugar, whatever. And the non-Jew denied him. And then, next day, the non-Jew needs something, and he comes to the Jew, and he says, can I borrow your ladder or a cup of flour? The Jew is permitted to say, no, you didn't lend me, I don't lend you. Whereas if it would be a Jew, it would be forbidden for the Jew to take that type of revenge. And furthermore, by a Jew, it's even forbidden to go ahead and not take revenge, but to carry a grudge. Like you can't have the attitude and say, well, I'm not like you. I asked you for a hammer yesterday. You said no. Now you're asking me for a ladder. Here you go. See the difference? A Jew can't do that to a fellow Jew. But to a non-Jew, he could. That is called nitira. Meiskoi. How about a dead non-Jew, a deceased? Imasar bana. Is his body forbidden to derive any benefit from it? Nechleku badavar, there is a dispute. Yesh tovim shemuter, there are those that say that it's permissible. That it will be allowed, for example, to shave off the hair and use it to make a wig. And then there are those that hold that just as a Jewish body, after he has deceased, is forbidden to derive any pleasure from, so too, exact the same thing, a non-Jew, also Jew cannot derive any benefit from it. Al goynev nefesh goy b'negel l'chiyuv misa. What about with regards to kidnapping? So we know that for a Jew to kidnap another Jew is a capital offense. I mean, there are conditions, but basically, it's a capital offense. How about if a Jew kidnaps a non-Jew? is that also a capital offense? Ayinoid Goynev Nefesh. So they're not getting into it, and they're telling us to look it up in this encyclopedia under Goynev Nefesh, which is kidnapping. Next subcategory here, with regards to his property, to the non-Jews' money or property. With regards to a lost article of a non-Jew, there is a dispute amongst the Mishnaic sages. The verse says that if you come upon the ox of your enemy, you are to return it. There's a mitzvah, a commandment of returning a lost article. One opinion says this enemy in the verse that it says you have the mitzvah to return the lost article is referring to a non-Jew that's an idol worshiper. And he brings a proof, because the verse elsewhere in the Chumash, in the Bible, states that when you go out to war against your enemy, so obviously enemy means the non-Jew. Tanoim acherim, but other Tanoim, other Mishnaic sages, mefarshim oivecha b'oiv Yisrael, they interpret this verse of finding the ox of your enemy, that it's a Jew who's your enemy. When they said, how do I know that the lost item of a non-Jew is permitted for the finder to keep? Because the verse says, for any lost item of your brother, to your brother, fellow Jew, you return it, not to the akum, to the non-Jew. And even after it already came to the hands of the Jew, the finder. And actually, if someone returns a lost item to a non-Jew who lost it, according to this opinion, he's actually transgressing. And with regards to such a person, we use the verse, in order to quench the thirst of the thirsty. Meaning, that he's showing this Jew is showing that returning a lost article, that's not considered a mitzvah, commandment of God in his eyes. Because he does it for the non-Jew as well. So he's not doing it because it's a mitzvah. Obviously, you're doing it because you think it's the right thing, you're a nice person. It seems to be the civil thing to do. So you're not doing it as a commandment of God. When is it clear that you're doing it as a commandment of God? If you generally don't return lost items to non-Jews. And to the fellow Jew, you do. So when this verse says, Hatzmeya, the one who's, that you're giving the Rava, the one that is, his thirst is quenched, that is the non-Jews, because they are satiated, and they're not thirsty for God. Vitzmeya, so who does the verse refer to when it says thirsty? Zoi Knesset Yisrael, this is the Jewish congregation, Shetzmeya liyiras Yetzra, who is thirsty for awe and fear of its creator. The Yesh Mefarshim, and there are those that explain Mipnei Shu Machzik Yad Rishei Olam, that the reason is because he's supporting the hand of the wicked. That's why you don't return a lost article of a goy, because you don't want to give them any support. Because for Rishonim Shaloi Nemeru Dvarim Eile Elo Begoyim Akadumim, and then the Rishonim, the early codifiers, interpreters of the Gemara, they explain that this whole thing is only said about the early, the non-Jews of way back. She'enam Gdurim B'nimusin V'das V'evda V'dazara, because they don't have common manners and decency, they don't have religion, and they are idolaters. Shekol Mitzvah mixes kinyanu, because every time you find something, so any time the finder picks up any article, it's a little bit of an acquisition. V'chazarasa, So therefore, returning it to its original owner, afilu Yisrael, even to a Jew, derech chasidusi. It's a way of piety. You're going above and beyond the law. Because as soon as you find it and pick it up, it became yours. And we, the Jews, are not subdued to show chasidus, piety, to someone who has no religion. But the nations that are bordered, are curtailed in the ways of religion, even though their belief is very far from our belief. According to this opinion, they are like an absolute Jew without any difference whatsoever as far as returning a lost article is concerned. Because they're religious, even though their religion does not agree with our faith. But the Jew has to treat them like a Jew when it comes to returning a lost article. And even amongst those where the lost article is permissible to keep, but if in a case like that where the Jew is allowed to keep it, if his intention of returning it was in order to make what we call a Kiddush Hashem, to sanctify the name of God, the people are going to say, wow, look at that wonderful nation, look at that Jew. They returned something. Your average person would just keep it. They can get away with it. And he returned it. So that's sanctifying God's name. In order that they should glorify the Jews. And they will know that the Jewish people are really trustworthy people. That's praiseworthy. And that's not called a sin, even though he's returning it to a guy that we said you normally should not. How about in a case where there would be the opposite? God forbid there would be a desecration of God's name. Then it's forbidden to keep it and you must give it back. Even if it's not going to make a Kiddush Hashem. But if keeping it, which is the law, would cause a Chilul Hashem, a desecration of God's name, then you have to return it. And even if it didn't yet come into the possession of the Jew, he didn't even take it, he's required to go ahead, pick it up, and return it to the non-Jew. Meaning to say, this is when the Goyim will think that the Jew stole it, because if they're going to see that it's missing, or they're going to see it by a Jew, they're not going to say, oh, it was lost. They will think he stole it. Or he's going to think that the Jew found it. And in any case, you always bring in the tools or the different vessels of the non-Jews, just like you would for the Jews. So if it's you see a non-Jew who has left outside his tools, and it's starting to rain, and they will get all rusty or ruined, so you bring them indoors like you would for a Jew. And this is because of ways of peace. Because when the Torah says that the lost item of a non-Jew is permitted for the Jew to keep, that's only when it has the status of aveda, of lost article, that it fell from him and he doesn't know about it, he's unaware. But when the Jew sees that if he brings in his tools to protect them from thieves, so he's got to do so. With regards to the prohibition against stealing or robbing a non-Jew, and all of the details of that, so they're telling us where to look up as well, and that is under Gezel Hagoy. That's another separate section. The Gezel, the stealing from a Goy. So in truth, even though we're doing the one entry called Goy, and it's so long, but really if we were to follow all of these cross-references, it's a lot more, I should say. So So as we discussed, a Jew is allowed to lend and borrow from the non-Jew or to the non-Jew with interest. Shenemar lanochi sashich, because the verse says you are to charge interest from the non-Jew. Oil if yishnemar bribis, or because when it speaks about interest, it says v'chei achicha imach, that your brother shall live with you, meaning treat him equally, and if you lend him money, don't take back any more, but that's your brother. There are those Rishonim which maintain that it's actually a positive commandment to lend money to the non-Jew with interest. Because the verse says, to the non-Jew you shall take interest. And they interpret this verse not just as permission, but they say it is actually a positive commandment. And likewise, it is a positive commandment to not harass, but to bother, to continuously ask the non-Jew who owes the Jew money. And to force him to pay up his debt. Shneimar, for the verse says, that you should pester the non-Jew. Mitzvah aseh is also mitzvah aseh. See, in both of these verses, with regards to interest and with regards to demanding and bothering him, it first says, don't do this to your fellow Jew. And then it says, to the non-Jew, you do. So the question is, do I read that as permission or do I read it as an actual mitzvah? And on this opinion, there are other Rishonim which disagree. The Soivrim, and they hold, She'ein elu mitzvahs aseh, these are not mitzvahs aseh, they're not positive commandments, elu rishus, they are merely permissible. V'lo yomru zu mitzvahs aseh, elu loimer shanoishech li Yisrael v'anoiksoi, oiver belav abo michlal aseh. So when they say it's a mitzvah aseh, it's a positive commandment, they simply mean to say that a Jew who does take interest from a fellow Jew, or who does bother a fellow Jew to pay up, is transgressing a negative commandment which comes out of a positive one. Just as we say with regards to every negative commandment, that we derive it from the language of the positive commandment being written in a way of permission. As we said earlier, rabbinically it's forbidden for the Jew to lend money to the non-Jew with ribis, with interest. They said, that someone who increases his wealth through interest pass me that. Enough. Yes. Thank you. The verse in Mishlei Proverbs, Mar behoinoi beneshech v'sarbis l'cheinen dalim yikbetzenu. One who multiplies his wealth through interest and an increase gathers it for the pardon of the poor. Shalzeh Shemar behoine b'neshech shel goyim nemar. That this verse is referring to a Jew who is increasing his wealth by taking interest from the goy. Shesoifei, what's going to happen at the end? Shamel chitul mimenu hamomin, that the king is going to take away from him that money. V'chein amru, and likewise they said, Shashevach shamar David, the praise that King David said, Kaspei lenosan beneshech. He's praising a person in the book of Psalms 15, verse 5, that he did not give his money to interest, afilu beribis shel goy nemar, that this is referring even to interest of a non-Jew. Dinim shel arba shoim rimenam amurim elo b'nichsei Yisrael. Okay, in the parsha of Mishpatim, in the book of Shmois of Exodus, so we find the 4 types of guards, of watch people, who are watching someone else's property. And they have different rules and liability. Those rules only apply to Jews. Shenamar, for the verse says, Ki itini shel re'ehu, that if someone was to give and deposit with his fellow Jew, prat lacherim, to exclude others, Elim can keep it all of Yisrael beferish achrayis, unless the Jew took upon himself clearly and explicitly the liability, that he obligated himself to pay if it gets stolen or lost. Then he's obligated even if he was not negligent in guarding it. And likewise the other way around. If a non-Jew received something from a Jew to watch, he's also exempt. Even if the non-Jew was negligent. Because when the Torah speaks about how you need to be with someone else's property, it keeps on using the term re'ehu, which means his fellow Jew. And others argue, and they say that it's not so, but in fact it does apply to the non-Jew as well. To a Jew watching property of a non-Jew, whether it's for pay or not for pay, whether he's borrowing, all the rules would be the same.
Would it be the case where whichever legal
category it falls into?
Well, if it's better for the Jewish person to understand it by the nation or by the Jewish court?
Okay. So, well, according to one opinion, no, the ruling would be that it's just like it would be two Jews, whether it works for or against the Jew. But according to the other opinion, it's totally irrelevant to these the rule of these 4 guards.
I mean, in a case where the nation would be stricter for what a person's supposed to guard, what they're responsible for, then the Jewish person that places something with the non-Jew would be better for him to go to the nation's court. Whereas if it's more lenient for the nations, then it would be better for the Jewish person to go to the Beis Din.
Right, but the question is, in this case, does he have that option? So probably, so it depends on which opinion you're following. Okay, I think we're going to stop here. And we are currently on the 4th line of page Shin Samech Aleph, 361. And there's really not all that much left in this entry of Goy, but it is getting quite late and we are running out of time. So perhaps next class we will continue. In the meantime, everybody be well and make sure to behave and keep all of the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, because God said so through Moses, and everyone do your share to bring about the coming of Mashiach, the Messiah, now.